because I want you to know you can do it. At the end of the day, you were built to birth your baby. Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Elizabeth, also known as Nurse Zabe, here on YouTube and Instagram. I'm a labor and delivery nurse, postpartum nurse, certified childbirth educator, and mom to 3. And today I am coming at you with a video on my top 10 tips that you can do to prepare to cope through labor without an epidural. Now, I want to say, if you're planning on getting an epidural, don't click out of this video, because chances are, regardless of wanting to get an epidural or not, there will be moments in your labor before the epidural is placed, or maybe if the epidural isn't working as we would hope, or maybe you're just feeling a lot of pressure when baby's being born, when you're still going to need to use some of these tips and tricks to make it through your labor. So I think that this video really is for anybody who is expecting to have a baby. And even if you have a planned cesarean birth, some of these tips and tricks can help you with that as well. So I encourage you guys to grab your partner if you can, because a lot of these tips are things that maybe the two of you can do to prepare together. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. So when we're talking about having a baby, going through the laboring process and the birthing process without an epidural, I want you to know it is a mental game. It really is. It is mind over matter to make it through. It is having the perspective that we are in pain, but we're not suffering, and working mentally to keep our minds and our brains from going to that suffering, right? No one should have to suffer through labor. Penny Simpkins said that. So a lot of labor is a mental game. And so a lot of the tips and tricks that I'm going to give you are ways that we can just approach everything one contraction at a time, getting through each contraction without looking ahead onto the next one is going to be your clue. That being said, labor is also, and birth is also physics. It's physics and psyche together are how babies are born. And so if we can optimize fetal positioning before labor and in early labor, we can have a labor that's easier, faster, less painful. All that means is that all of our mental preparation will have to work less intensely to get us through hopefully a shorter and easier labor. So the first thing that I encourage you to do is what you're doing right now. Research. I really encourage that you sign up for a birth class that speaks to you. Now, a lot of hospitals will offer birth classes, and I think that it's great to do a hospital birthing class. I teach a hospital birthing class, but a lot of those birthing classes that are provided by the hospital, let's say like they're an hour, 2 hour in length, they're not gonna really go down into the nitty gritty, and a lot of that class might actually be spent teaching you how to be a good patient. That is not your job. Your job when you're having a baby is not to be a good patient. I think it can be helpful to know the policies and procedure at your hospital by taking a hospital-based childbirth education class. I also think it might be helpful to take a class that's not based in the hospital. But, and this is the important part, it's really helpful if you take this class with your birth partner, whoever's going to be there with you for the birth, because you are going to be in labor land. You are going to be out of your neocortex. You're going to be in your mammalian brain once you hit about 5 centimeters and you're rocking and rolling into active labor. You're not going to be sitting there thinking about all of the different coping strategies that you guys learned. So it will be up to your birth partner to help pull those things out of your labor toolbox. The other thing that is going to be really, really helpful to do when you are packing a physical labor bag is to do that together so that you can ask your birth partner for a chapstick, or you could ask them for the heat pack, and then you don't need to go into specific detail on where you packed all those things. Pack the bag together so that then either one of you can easily go in and get the item that you need when you are in labor. The next thing that I really encourage you to do is to listen and watch positive birth stories. There is the Birth Hour podcast that is fabulous, and that will kind of go into, in their little summary of each podcast, what happens in that birth. There are also many positive birth stories here on the internet, on Instagram, on YouTube. You know, birth doesn't always go as we plan or as we foresee. So a positive birth story doesn't always have to be one that aligns exactly with what you're hoping or planning for your birth. It's great to have lots of different perspectives, but it might not be so helpful to listen to birth stories that bring fear, because when we're fearful of birth, it makes us more tense. My next tip for you is thinking about in your pregnancy how we are strategically changing our body, moving our body to help facilitate an easier and faster birth. One of the very simplest ways that you can do this is by walking. That movement can create some good strength in our muscles, because for labor and delivery, the muscles and ligaments of our pelvis, we need for them to be strong and supple. And so that's where we're looking for. I'm not saying go out and start like deadlifting 50 pounds. That's silly. You don't need to do 50 squats a day, but we need to provide a little bit of movement to allow for some suppleness and movement of our muscles. And all of these things will help get baby in the best positions possible to more easily start spontaneous labor and labor to be easier and faster. Spinning babies is a really, really good resource on helping get your baby into a fabulous position. I have a video on prodromal labor that goes over some of those positions, and also the Miles circuit, which you might use in early labor if you think that your baby is in less than optimal position. If you're having start and stop labor, we are trying to get baby into a better position. So I will leave that linked in the iCards as well. The other thing that we want to consider too is if we're having any pelvic floor dysfunction, so urinary incontinence, fecal incontinence, really bad constipation, pain with intercourse, aches and pains when we're moving around, like round ligament pain that's significant, SI joint pain that's significant, or symphysis pubic discomfort that's significant, to seek out a pelvic floor physical therapist before we get to the labor process, because all of those things can impact your baby's ability to enter and navigate through the pelvis, which is going to make labor hurt more and take longer, right? Which is the things we're trying to avoid if we're trying to have a baby without an epidural. A chiropractor who specializes in the Webster technique might also be a beneficial person to have on your team when you're preparing for labor. When we're thinking about labor and birth teams, there are a lot of people who might want to be in there with you for your birth. I encourage you to have people in there that make you feel safe, that you feel like you could be naked in front of with no problem. And do you want a trained professional in your birth space? We know that doulas reduce the risk of cesarean birth. They increase the risk of spontaneous vaginal births without epidurals. So that might be something, if you're considering an unmedicated birth, or if your hope is for an unmedicated birth, that perhaps you are interested in hiring a doula, who is a person who has had training in supporting people through their labors and helping make sure that their support person is also being as supportive as possible. So a doula might be a piece of the puzzle that works really well for you in helping you cope. Okay, so those are all the things that we are doing before labor even starts. It's a lot of things. You can see how much preparation we are really putting into a labor where we are hoping to have an unmedicated birth. Now, once labor gets started, once your contractions start, I have a tip for you that is the best way to make your labor feel as short as possible. When early labor starts, when your contractions are irregular, when they are mild and you're still talking through them, but you're noticing some tightening, ignore them and tuck yourself into that bed. The best way to make labor shorter is to sleep and ignore it until you can't ignore it anymore. Now, for some people, labor starts off hot and heavy, but for a lot of people, there might be a day or a few hours where things are pretty spaced out and maybe starting to get ramped up. Maybe you're feeling like you're having some period cramps. Snuggle in, take a nap, and ignore labor for as long as you can. You'll be less exhausted. And exhaustion is one of the really big pieces that can play into us experiencing pain, and then that moving to us experiencing suffering in our labor because we are simply exhausted. So I know it's exciting when contractions start. If it's 3 a.m. and you feel a contraction, you don't need to necessarily get up on the birth ball. If it's 3 a.m. and your water breaks, check with your provider. But if you're Group B strep negative and your amniotic fluid is clear and we are low risk, that is not even necessarily a reason for you to head to the hospital. Most labors will start within 12 to 24 hours of your water breaking. So if it's 3 a.m., call and they might be like, hey, go ahead and go back to sleep. And you're gonna be like, okay, I will do that. Good night. I The next tip that I have for you is one that is going to get you through the majority of your labor. It's one that is so incredibly vital and so incredibly obvious that sometimes we don't even think about it. And it's breathing. I'm breathing right now. You're breathing right now. We're all breathing involuntarily all the time so that we can oxygenate ourselves and also our babies. But when we experience a sensation that is unpleasant, often our breathing changes with an adrenaline spike to reflect that. Maybe we hold our breath, maybe we're breathing really fast, maybe we're tensing up. And with labor, we need to do the opposite of that, because when we are able to breathe and stay relaxed, our contractions are what? More effective and less uncomfortable. The type of breathing that takes people through most of their labors is a slow abdominal breath that is about half the rate of your normal breath. So we'll do a few with you, but we can't just be like, oh, I'm gonna breathe in labor. You need to practice breathing beforehand. So meditation can be a great way to practice this, yoga can be a way to practice this, or simply when you're feeling frustrated, uncomfortable, upset while you're pooping, practice your breathing. Practice with your partner so that they know what it looks like and they can help guide you if you're having struggles with your breathing. We're gonna practice some breaths with you. We're gonna practice these slow, deep abdominal breaths. You're gonna breathe in a way that feels good and right for you. I really encourage, if you're able to breathe through your nose, to do so, at least for the intake, because that's gonna help humidify that air. Hospital air is very, very dry. We are going to do a breath in and we're gonna fill up our diaphragm so that our belly moves out. Once your baby drops in labor, this tends to get a little bit easier. We're gonna breathe in for 4, out for 6, and we're gonna do cycles of 4 of these because that will tend to get most people through the peak of their contraction when they're practicing. So we're gonna do a nice deep breath in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That was 40 seconds. Most contractions are 60 to 90, but they build like a wave. So we hopefully are hitting that peak and coming back down by the time those 4 repetitions are done. That intentional, slow, deep abdominal breath is going to enhance your labor hormones, it's going to enhance your coping, and it's going to make it easier for your baby to travel through your pelvis and your pelvic floor specifically. Okay, those deep abdominal breaths are something that you need to practice. I have a whole video on breathing. I'll leave it in an iCard. Check it out. When you're doing those breaths, you really want to focus too on just relaxing everything, melting your forehead, your jaw, your throat, your vocal cord. If we have tension here, we have tension in our pelvic floor. So these need to be relaxed. Speaking of, if you're making noises, love it. That's called your birth song. You sing that birth song, but keep it low and open. Some people will even say, open, ah. If we're up here, ah! Scream with me right now if you want. Ah! Up high, you can feel your pelvic floor. If we have that tightness, if we're up here, our pelvic floor is too, and then that's not yielding to your baby, and it makes things more uncomfortable. So we really want to focus on relaxing everything, which is hard, and that's why we're practicing before we get into the labor and delivery unit or before we get to our preferred birthing location. Okay, so I already chatted a little bit about how being relaxed helps to support our labor hormones, but we want to really facilitate our labor hormones because when they all work together in sync, it makes our labors what? Easier, faster, less uncomfortable. I know I sound like a broken record, but it really is all of these things working together. So the 3 key players that I want to talk about: oxytocin, which is our love or bonding hormone. It also creates contraction. Melatonin, which enhances that. And then also endorphins, which are natural pain relievers. Those 3 work together in tandem with prostaglandins to facilitate our labor and to facilitate a reaction to labor that hopefully is keeping us in that labor land parasympathetic part of our nervous system, in our mammalian part of our brain, and not releasing adrenaline and other catecholamines. So How can we support those labor hormones? We need our environment to be dark. We need to feel safe, and we need to feel unwatched, and we need to feel supported and secure, which might be a little challenging when we enter the hospital setting. So I always turn off all of the lights. My providers, they know after the birth, almost every single time, they're like, Elizabeth, can I now please have some light? Because I have turned off every single light. I encourage you to bring twinkle lights. I encourage you to bring little non-flammable candles. Please don't light a flame in the hospital. But dim, dark lighting makes a huge difference. One of the biggest differences in my own labor. Safe and unwatched, but also supported, can feel different for everybody, so you're gonna play around with it. Maybe your partner is gonna be the one who's in charge of getting people in and out of the room as you need them. A place where you can have all of these things and also be upright and relaxing your pelvic floor while baby's putting pressure on your cervix, which helps these hormones as well, is in the bathroom. I love a good bathroom labor. I think we should spend about a few contractions every hour on the toilet once active labor hits in. We call that the dilation station. I love it. We can turn off the light, we can shut the door, we can be upright, leaning over the toilet where we are naturally relaxing our pelvic floor, and it's gonna make those contractions work a little bit better. Maybe be a little bit more intense, but work a little bit better. So I encourage you. We also want to be peeing every hour anyway. So supporting your labor hormones will support all of our natural things that help us get through labor, because epidurals are kind of new. They are not what's been around for the whole time. And for the record, I am in no way anti-epidural. I love an epidural. I think that they are a fabulous tool. But these are all tools that we can use whether we want an epidural or not. We've talked about how important optimal fetal positioning is. One thing that can make optimal fetal positioning easier is if your bag of water is still intact. So I really encourage you to use your brain acronym to really think through why maybe an artificial rupture of membranes is being offered, and if you would like to do that. We know that having your waters broken when your baby is already malpositioned can kind of lock and load them into that position. We also know that having your bag of waters broken, even if your baby is optimally positioned, can make labor stronger. So if you're coping well through labor, you might not want your waters broken at that moment. A great time to have your waters broken, if this is something that you decide to do, is once your baby is in that optimal position, around 6, 7, 8 centimeters. That might be a great time to have your bag of water broken. Just knowing that things will get more intense once we break the bag of water. So if you're coping well and your labor is progressing well, there's no reason to break the bag, just to speed things along. Because when speeding things along, we also speed up how intense quickly those contractions are coming. So just something to think about. So the other thing, if you are coping through your labor without an epidural, that can be really, really important, both for helping with fetal positioning, but also for helping you cope, is position changes and movement. You'll notice that you naturally are going to be moving around, moving your body with the contractions. The place often that feels the most uncomfortable with contractions is when you're lying in the bed on your back. This is also the place that encourages your baby to get into the worst position possible. So I encourage you to get up and move, and this often is going to be best facilitated if you are using intermittent monitoring, which means once you have made sure that baby is healthy and they're well oxygenated on the external fetal monitor, that we actually take those off and we listen to the baby with the Doppler about every 30 minutes. This is evidence-based support for low-risk people in birth. But if, let's say, we're augmenting your labor, we're giving you a medication to make your labor more intense, or you're high risk, you might need to be on the monitor. But just because you're on the monitor does not mean that you need to be in the bed. Some facilities will have portable monitors where you can really be upright and moving, but even if they don't, you can sit on the ball next to the bed. You can stand up next to the bed. You can be on your hands and knees on the bed. You do not need to be on your back in the bed just because you're on the monitor. That's going to make labor contractions more uncomfortable and harder to cope through, and it's going to make it harder for you to use some of your natural coping mechanisms where you are finding a rhythm and a ritual and relaxation, the 3 R's of Penny Simpkins. The other thing that you might learn in a childbirth class, and I have a video again on it as well, is touch in labor. So you might find that a double hip squeeze, counter pressure on your sacrum, or counter pressure on your knees might all help you cope through labor, as well as massage. Those can all be things. And then talking or working words. Again, part of my labor toolbox series. I encourage you to practice these positions with your partner and to go online and find a list of things that you would like sent to you in labor or repeated to you in labor that sound good and right for you. It can be helpful to have a variety of things that your partner can say to you. I even encourage you, if you'd like, to write them down on paper and post those up around the room. So if you open your eyes, that's something that you can see, or it can remind your care providers to say these things to you in labor. Okay, my very last tip for coping through labor without an epidural. Y'all knew it was coming. Maybe you didn't. It's this barber's comb. This super simple, every single hospital has them. You can buy them for like 2 cents. Barber's comb. What does this guy do? This can operate through the gate control theory of pain, which basically, with a contraction, if I squeeze it with the bristle side into my hand, that sensation gets to my brain just a little bit faster than the contraction pain, kind of distracts our brain from the contraction pain, shuts that one gate so that when we are feeling the sensations with the contraction, those surges can't quite get through that gate fully as they would without it. So it's a great distraction tool. A TENS unit can also do something similar, but this I love because it's easy, it's cheap, the hospital has it, and you can take it in the water. So I give all of my patients a comb, and a lot of them use it and love it. This got me through my last unmedicated labor, and I had the marks on my hands to prove it, but it is a great little tool that we can use, and it is super cheap and super easy. Those are all my tips for coping with an unmedicated labor. Let me know if you have any tips below. Definitely check out my labor toolbox series if you want to see more of these tips actually in action, of like the coping mechanisms that we're using. But a lot of this was how we can get ourselves mentally into that headspace, because I want you to know you can do it. At the end of the day, you were built to birth your baby. You can do it. And all of this, that's the mindset that I want you to have. I am powerful and capable, and I can do this. Let me know if you have any other tips for coping through labor without an epidural, other ones that you've heard, that your friends have used, or that you yourself have used, down in the comments below. And until next time, bye guys.